So we spent a few weeks talking about humility and specifically using the book by Hannah Anderson titled Humble Roots. And it's a wonderful book, and as I've mentioned a couple of times, I've referred to it more than once in the last year since I read it. And it was really encouraging and challenging at the same time. And it's hard to find that tone sometimes in books. As somebody who preaches and somebody who speaks and somebody who teaches, it's hard to cultivate that tone, the tone where you're pointing and saying, hey, we really can do better at this, but also saying, hey, this is really an issue where we all find ourselves. And so I think she does a wonderful job of cultivating and sharing that tone in her book while presenting a very challenging thing for us to live in humility. In chapter 5, she talks about local honey and the role that it played in her community, and how when she was given a jar of honey, that the gentleman who gave it to her assured her, and it was labeled on the jar, 100% honey. And the emphasis there is that it wasn't cut with corn syrup, or it wasn't cut with some sugar water or some other thing that would allow the manufacturer of that honey, the local gentleman, to multiply the amount of honey that he produced outside of his bees. And that's certainly an issue, and even in our own local stuff, we see them labeling 100% pure honey, and then others have to add, or they're supposed to add if they've added any other ingredients to it, like corn syrup or sugar or anything like that. And she notes the role that played in the community, of how they trusted each other and how they communicated with each other. And she uses that to refer to the role that our bodies play in being humble, that our actual physical bodies play. And we've spent some time talking about this over the last few years. In fact, we had two classes that met a few months ago using Dallas Willard's book, The Spirit of the Disciplines. And Dallas Willard spends a lot of time talking in his book about how we actually have to use the bodies that we are given. And so sometimes in the spiritual topics and spiritual conversations, we have this tendency to either dumb down or overinflate the body. And we don't say, this is what I have, this is what I can function with, and this is what God has given me. And so we have a tendency to do that. And she notes in her book the tendency for us to do that, and how as a child of God, that what we have, this physical body, these emotions that are attached to us, these things that are a part of us, that they are what we have to work with. And that humility can only be found in applying that and stepping into that and understanding that and having a willingness to engage in that way. And so we are to care for our bodies, just as you would want the producer of local honey to care for their bees and the environment that their bees are in. We are to care for our bodies. We are to look out for the needs of our bodies, and then to respond to the needs that our bodies reveal to us. And so we can have a lot of shame centered around our bodies. We can have a lot of manipulation centered around our bodies. And if that happens too much, what will end up happening is we'll have a disconnect between who God created us to be and then who we perceive ourselves to be, or who we are even attempting to be. And this becomes very problematic because we end up with all these split personalities, if you will, within us, trying to tell us to do here and there and different things. And it's very distracting for us. And as Dallas Willard pointed out, as I've noted in his book, that can keep us from knowing God, because you can't know God outside of your current situation, your current reality, your current circumstances, which include the physical body that you and I inhabit. Now, that's a challenging word, and you may not have thought through it a lot, but it's worth thinking through. And so we have to understand our limits. Humility is embracing our limits. Sometimes our limits are saying, I can't go there, I can't do that, I can't fulfill that task. I can't even take on that task, or I can't meet with those people today, or whatever it may be. Humility is an understanding and a stepping into that in a willful way. And that interplay between who God is calling us to be and what His Spirit is bringing about in our lives, and then our recognition of how our body is responding and how we are either utilizing or condemning or misshaping our body in the response is very helpful. Paul, when he was writing to the group in Colossae, and the book of Colossians, he said this: don't let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival. And what he's saying there is there was a ton of emphasis put on what the people's bodies were actually doing. And he was saying it was causing this division within the individuals, that they were feeling this condemnation over something that they were not feeling condemnation over, but was coming from without them. And he goes on to say this. He says, don't let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. That is a challenging word for us to consider. We serve God with the bodies that we have, the bodies that He gifted to us, the bodies that He designed to be able to serve Him. And we should be willing to embrace that and understand that our limits, our struggles are ours, and they are how we know God. And we can understand His faithfulness to us. So, you and I both have a physical body. Let's inhabit it. Let's trust God to work in us, and then let's apply this physical body into serving Him. God bless you. We'll see you next time.